Brady Blevins, Senior Apologist for Watchman Fellowship, and I want to talk to you today about maybe the most misunderstood word in all the Bible. What word am I talking about?
I gotta have faith, faith, faith.
That's right, I'm talking about the word faith. But you see, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what is faith. And so, when we think about this word faith, there's a lot of things that come to people's mind. In fact, a lot of times when people hear the word faith, they think of something kind of like this.
But under no circumstance are you allowed to take off your blindfold.
Or maybe we could better understand faith not to be some kind of blind leap, or we're just kind of hoping in something that we really don't have any good reasons to believe. Or maybe it would be better to say that faith looks a little bit more like this. Now, I think those are better examples of what faith is really like than our first clip. But I want to share with you what some skeptics and some atheists and agnostics have, the ways that they've defined faith over the years. Let me give you a couple of examples. Our first example is by an author by the name of Mark Twain. You may have heard of Mark Twain or not. He wrote a number of books, but he said this: faith is believing what you know ain't so. Let me give you another example. Atheist and college professor Peter Boghossian said faith is pretending to know things that you don't know and belief without evidence. Evolutionary biologist by the name of Richard Dawkins said this: faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. Now, I think one of the biggest problems is it's not just atheists who have this definition of faith. There's even some believers who think that when we say faith, we're just meaning that we're believing in something that we have no evidence for. We have no way of knowing if it's really right or not. And quite frankly, that's just not the case. But even if we were to go and try to look up the definition of the word faith, we would have the exact same problem. In fact, let's just go to the computer right now and let's just Google the word faith and see what happens. So we go over here to the computer, we type in the word faith, and we see a definition come up. The very first one says complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Well, that's a pretty good definition. But look at the second one. Strong belief in God or in the doctrines of religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. So does that settle it? No, I don't think so at all. Because what we have to understand is when we read the Bible and we come across this word faith, we're reading an English word that was translated from a Greek word. So if we want to really know what the word faith is, we need to go back and look at the Greek word that's translated faith for us. Now, the word that's translated, in fact, the word faith is used over 300 times in the New Testament. And the vast majority of those times, it is written, the word pistis is the word that's used for faith. So, now we also see in some of the other places, we'll see words like believed, where you have a word that's similar to faith, similar to the Greek word pistis, pistuo. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But the word that is most often translated faith is the word pistis. And so, okay, what does the word pistis mean? Well, let's take a look at one of the most respected Greek lexicons, Louw-Nida. And let's see how Louw-Nida defines the word pistis. To believe to the extent of complete trust and reliance. To believe in, to have confidence in, to have faith in, to trust. Faith, trust. Now I gotta ask you, would you trust in something without evidence? Absolutely not. I sure wouldn't. But maybe there's some people that would. Now, the concept, this is what's interesting here. I did some research on this, and there was actually a group of professors who wrote a paper in the Southern Illinois University Press, and they were speaking about the way that the Greek word pistis was used in New Testament times. And what they said was this, is it required the listener to be knowledgeable about the subject in question, so that they had to be fully able to accept the issue at hand. It wasn't just a fleeting knowledge, or I'm going to trust this with no. They had to have a good knowledge of something if you're going to use the word pistis. If not, you needed to use a different Greek word. It's interesting that's what they found. They're certainly not looking to make a case for Christianity in their paper. They're just talking about how a Greek word is used. Now, let's think about this a little bit more. Because as we look at this lexicon definition, we see that it's to believe something to the extent that you have complete trust in it. Now, that's pretty powerful when you think about it. Because this means that you are trusting something to the point to where you are completely giving yourself to it. So keep that in mind, because we're going to look at this a little bit further. Now, what is faith according to the Bible? Now, a lot of people will immediately, Christians and non-Christians alike, will run to Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1 and say, this is the definition. Well, let's check out what Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 1 says. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Now, a lot of people stop right after verse 1. Listen, Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 1 is not the definition of faith. It's the beginning of the definition of faith. If we really want to understand what faith means, we can look at Hebrews 11, but we need to look at the entire chapter. We need to try to understand what it says. Well, let's go back to Hebrews chapter 11 for just a moment. Let's just look at least the first 3 verses, and then we'll look at a few examples later on in the chapter. This is what Hebrews 11, 1 through 3 says. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it, the people of old received their commendation. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So what exactly is faith? Well, think about faith like this. Faith is not just believing that something is true, but believing it by trusting in it. So as we see that this whole Hebrews 11 concept is not just some kind of blind faith and we just kind of hope or maybe something like that. No. Hebrews chapter 11 is telling us that this is more of an experiential thing. In fact, as you go through the rest of the chapter, you see whether it's Abel or Enoch or Abraham or David, that all these people had some evidence that they rolled on before they put their trust in God. In fact, I think one of the best examples is Rahab the harlot. Now, if you're not familiar with her story, she's the one who she lived in Jericho and she housed the spies from the children of Israel, and she protected them when their life was in danger as they were spying out Jericho right before the children of Israel entered into the promised land. You say, okay, well, what was her evidence? She didn't have a first-hand experience with God. Well, that's great because, hey, most of us aren't getting an audible message from God either, right? No. What does the Bible say? Well, it says that she had heard about how the God of the Hebrew people had delivered them out of Egypt and how they had crossed the Red Sea, and that was her evidence. So her evidence was the report of what God had done for the children of Israel. And based on that evidence, she put her faith, or maybe could we better say trust, that the God of the Hebrew people was indeed God and could do what He said He was going to do. So as a result, when it came time, she put her trust in that God by hiding the spies. And so therefore she had faith or trust in God. Look at what one of the commentators said concerning Hebrews chapter 11 and this whole issue of faith. In its essence, faith is being sure and certain about unseen hopes and realities. Now the question is how can we be sure about unseen hopes and realities? Well, the rest of the chapter fills in the blank. Like I said before, whether it's Abel or Enoch or Abraham or Rahab or David or whoever you want to pick, all of these people have evidence that they go on to make the decision on whether or not to place their trust in God. This is the essence of faith. Now, as we think about this, there's a flip side to it. And a lot of times skeptics will say, you know what, if you have to have evidence, then you don't really have faith. And they like to point to John chapter number 20. Now you say, hey, what happened in John chapter 20? Well, here's the deal. Jesus had died on the cross, he had rose from the dead, and we're a couple days after the resurrection, and he has appeared to a number of the disciples, but there's one disciple he hadn't appeared to yet. And that was a guy by the name of Thomas. You might know him as Doubting Thomas. And here's what happens. The disciples are saying, Jesus is risen from the dead. We've seen him ourselves. And what happens? Thomas says, no. Not unless I stick my finger in the nail prints or thrust my hand into his side will I believe. By the way, that word believe in Greek is pisteuo, which comes from the word pistis. And so he's saying, you know what, unless I see the evidence with my own eyes, I will never believe. Now, if you're familiar with the story, you know what happens. Just a short time later, Jesus appears before him and says, hey Thomas, you want to stick your fingers here in the nail prints? You want to thrust your hand into my side? And of course, Thomas's response is, my Lord and my God. Now, that's not the part that the skeptics have a problem with. It actually goes all the way down to verse number 29. Let's take a look now. It says this, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Now, this is where a lot of skeptics will point. They'll say, wait, hold on. Jesus is telling you right here, blessed are those who haven't seen, who haven't had this physical evidence in front of them, and still believe. You see, faith is really all about believing something that you're not even really certain if it's true or not. But that's not what's happening here. Let's look back at the verse. Jesus says, have you believed, pisteuo, because you have not seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed, or pisteuo again. Look at verse number 30. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Think about what John's saying. Jesus did many other signs and miracles, but this is what I've written to you so that you may know that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that you may have eternal life. John's saying, I'm giving you the evidence. I am giving you the first-hand experience of who Jesus is. This is the evidence we have to go on. Now, why was Thomas blessed? Well, because Thomas got to have the physical evidence. He could actually touch Jesus. But this isn't the case for us. We're just like the people we are the people to whom John's writing to. So we can look at this evidence and know. That's powerful stuff. And this is the evidence-based information that John's giving us. Let me share this quote with you from my friend J. Warner Wallace. Jesus did not ask his followers to believe without evidence. In fact, he repeatedly provided evidence to support his claims. So think about that for a moment. Let's just look at just a couple of quick examples. In John chapter 10 and verse number 25, Jesus says this. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me. Then in John chapter 10 verse 37, just down a little bit further, he says, if I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works. What is Jesus saying? He's saying, don't believe for no reason. He's saying, believe because you've seen the works that I've done. See the evidence that I have provided you. And by the way, just for fun, all the times you've heard that word believe in these last couple of verses is the word pisteuo. All right. So again, we could go to example after example of Jesus talking about this all throughout the Bible. Now, there's an illustration, I think, that kind of help us to understand, because what we want to look at is we want to make sure we look at the difference between believing that something is true and believing in something to be true. Because there's a really big difference. See, believing that is just intellectual assent. I mean, you can believe that something is true all day long, but there's a difference between believing that and believing in. In fact, everyone has faith. It doesn't matter if you are a Christian or an atheist or an agnostic or a Jehovah's Witness, or you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or if you're a Hindu or Buddhist or Muslim, it doesn't matter. Everyone has faith. Let me give you an example of this. See, you believe that the airline pilot can take you to your destination. You believe that the car will stop when you press the brake pedal. You believe the chair will hold you up when you sit down. You believe the bulletproof vest will stop the bullet. See, look, you can believe that those things are true all day long, but it never means that you're actually placing your trust in those things. You'll never know if those things can ever really do that unless you believe in the airline pilot by boarding the airplane. You believe in the car's ability to stop by putting it in gear, or the chair by actually sitting down, or the bulletproof vest by stepping into the gunfire. See, if you don't have faith, or maybe we could better say trust, in the airline pilot, you're never getting on the plane. If you don't trust the brakes, you're never putting that car into gear. Not unless you have a death wish. Listen, if you don't really believe in that chair's ability to hold you up, you're never going to put your blessed assurance on it, right? Or how about this? You're not going to step into gunfire if you don't believe in that bulletproof vest to stop the bullet. See, once you actually put all those items into action, you go from believing that it can do it to believing in it to do it. Let me give you just one final illustration. Take, for example, somebody who wants to get married. I remember whenever I was thinking about asking my girlfriend to marry me. And I thought, you know what, I believe that she could be a good wife. I mean, she was compassionate, she was loving, she demonstrated all the qualities that I thought would make a really good wife. I believed that she could be a good wife. But see, I would never know if she could be a good wife unless I believed in her to be a good wife by marrying her. And once I placed my trust in her to be a good wife by marrying her, I actually got to see that she is indeed a good wife. Otherwise, I would only be left with believing that she would be a good wife, and I would still be single right now. But instead, I believed in her ability to be a good wife, and as a result, I got to experience that firsthand whenever I put my trust in her to be a good wife. What have we learned then? Well, we've learned that faith really equals trust. In fact, to really avoid confusion, it might even be better sometimes, rather than using the word faith, just to use the word trust. Because in reality, when we're talking about what the biblical writers meant by the word pistis, translated faith in our English Bible, what they were actually talking about is the word trust. And so I am very happy the fact that we have a reasonable faith that's based on evidence. It's not a blind leap or anything like that, but yet a reasonable faith that we can trust. I want to thank you for watching the video. My name is Brady Blevins, Senior Apologist at Watchman Fellowship. I'd like to encourage you, if you like this video, come check out our website, watchman.org, WATCHMAN, watchman.org, and we will be happy to answer any questions you have, or if you'd like to contact us with whatever you got on your mind, we'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you again for watching.